Welcome, Kathy, Laura, Audrey, Shayna, Anna, and Jen. So glad to have you online with us this morning. The spiritual truth that I'm working with this morning is to thine own self be true. To thine own self be true. Now, that actually are words written by Shakespeare for his play Hamlet, but I could find the exact same wisdom statements in the Bible, in the Torah, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Quran, in the sutras. To thine own self be true. And to be true to yourself, you need to really spend some time understanding who it is you are. What makes you happy? What makes you sad? Basically, what makes you tick? In churchy terms, we would say, what's in your consciousness? What's in your awake and aware consciousness? That's the consciousness you know about. And what's in your subconscious? That's the consciousness that you're unaware of, but it's still driving your force. It's your driving life. When we are about God's business, which is the business of learning how to reflect our spiritual magnificence instead of our unhealed past, being true to thyself takes on a whole new meaning. Yes, you have developed a personality. Be true to that. Yes, you have developed a set of likes and dislikes. Know what they are and be true to them. Acting like you like hip-hop or like you like opera when you really don't to impress somebody else will never work. We can spot phoniness a mile away. You've spotted it before, and maybe even you spotted it here in the church. When you've come and your heart is breaking and somebody doesn't know what to say, so they blurt out some spiritual platitude that makes your skin crawl, you know that that doesn't work. Know who you are at this moment and then set the intention to become more of what you want and less of what you don't want. As we said last week, we need to stop treating ourselves as nouns and start treating ourselves as verbs. We need to start treating ourselves as if we are moving pictures, not snapshots in our life. You know, the people in Santa Rosa who still think, there are some in Santa Rosa who still think of me as an angry street fighter for leftist ideals. They haven't kept up with me. Now look, I still hold leftist ideals, but I no longer fight for them in that same way. I try now to practice the teachings of our founder, Ernest Holmes, who said we need to be for something and against nothing. Yes, I want to be passionate about my leftist ideals. I want to march. I want to speak out. I want to write letters. I want to do whatever it is that I can to make them come to life. But I don't have to be against anything. I can just be for something. Peace and love are really the only answers to discord, not hurling rocks and not insults. Do I slip sometimes back into my angry reaction at mean-spirited policies and mean-spirited people? Yes, I do. But with these teachings, boy, I've come a long way. Part of Ernest Holmes' teachings is to be open at the top, to look for folks who can shed new light on these ancient wisdoms. Folks who are studying, like the one we're studying right now. We're studying Cindy Wiggleworth's book called SQ21. The 21 Skills of the Spiritually Intelligent. Her premise is that we can measure spiritual intelligence in the same way that we measure other intelligence: physical intelligence, cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence. And measuring things, especially our state of consciousness, is important because we get to see how it is we're improving in our life. We measure things all the time. You know, we want to see how we're doing with our commitment to slim down. We drag out that scale. I hate it, but we drag it out anyway. We want to see how we're doing with our commitment to get out of debt. We pay more attention to our credit card bills and to our bank statement. You measure your kids' progress at school all the time, simply by looking at their report cards. When we understand the definition of spiritual intelligence, we can begin to measure our interactions throughout the day to see just how intelligent we are. Here's the definition, and for those of you who came to the church this morning, you're very fortunate. I was afraid you might miss it, so I wrote it in your bulletin. It's in your notes already. Here's the definition: behaving with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of the condition. That's so powerful. Behaving with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of the condition. Now, this last week, I tested myself. I was very vigilant in measuring my spiritual intelligence as I went about my day. And in some instances, I clearly belong in the remedial class. So how do you move from remedial class to the advanced class? By studying and practicing, practicing, practicing. Not just learning about, but practicing these 21 skills of spiritual intelligence. Last week we looked at the first three: awareness of our own worldview. Number 2 was awareness of our own life purpose. Number 3 was awareness of our hierarchy, our values hierarchy. What's important to us? Where do we prioritize our time and our efforts? These skills are under the 4 headings, and they're on YouTube. If you missed them, they're on YouTube. The skills are under the 4 headings, and the first heading is Know Thyself. Know Thyself. So let's look at the final 2 in Know Thyself. Number 4, the complexity of inner thought, or how can I handle how complex my life gets? Now remember, this is a skill, and like all skills, it can be learned and it can be improved on. The trick is to stay aware of where you are on the scale of this skill. Complexity of inner thought points to the ability to hold nuance. We are not good at holding nuance. We are black and white people. This is good, that is bad in our life. The example Wigglesworth cites is the recognition that rules and guidelines are have sometimes a higher principle that requires us to break the rule that's in place. The entire civil rights movement was made up of leaders who had this particular spiritual intelligence skill. Some people believe that if people of color would only do what the police tell them when they're stopped, if they would only put their hands on the wheel, if they would only talk nice, if they would only do this, if they would only do that, then nothing bad would happen to them. How many more videos do we need to see to convince us that there is a higher rule that needs to be broken right here and right now in our life? The skill of the spiritual intelligence asks, should we be blindly obedient to the authority of a rule, or isn't there a higher principle of equality asking us to behave with wisdom and compassion while we're maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of what that rule is, regardless of what that guideline is? Now, I don't have time to dig too deeply into this morning, but let me say that the type of complexity is the easiest to understand, that type. I mean, we all know that. We all know that those rules need to be broken so that we can build and rebuild new rules that make more sense for people. But sometimes it's harder. The skill can go deeper. For instance, a higher level of development in the skill is becoming comfortable with multiple points of view and understanding that right and wrong are not simple matters. During the height of COVID, in some areas where ventilators were in short supply, doctors had to make a decision as to who would get the ventilator, the ones that would have the greatest chance to survive, and others didn't get it and most assuredly die. Those are some of the nuances that are required when we look at this skill in our life. The next skill, number 5, is the awareness of the ego self and the higher self. In other words, who is driving my life? Now, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, we're not a church that teaches smash the ego. Your ego has a purpose. It's a much smaller purpose than most of us give it. It has kept us safe in the past, and for that, we give thanks. It's also the part that has at times gotten us into the most trouble. It's the aspect of ourselves that can be selfish, immature, fearful, and defensive. Wigglesworth says that wherever there is drama in our life, it is a sure bet that two egos have been talking to each other. Your higher self is that part of you that is unselfish, that's loving, that's wise. While our work is not to smash the ego, it is important that we shift our thoughts and our actions from the ego to the higher self. That's the whole point of skill 5. Shifting our thoughts and our actions away from our ego into our higher self. And in order to do that, we have to identify the two voices that are different parts of ourselves. Your ego voice is often fear-based and uses the language of fight or flight. It's not so much interested in whether or not we are happy or productive. It's really only interested, are we safe? Our ego is looking for the right and wrong of any situation and potentially life-threatening situations. If you've ever found yourself acting out of character to the point where you said, I don't know where that came from, you can be pretty sure it came from listening to the voice of your ego. The higher self voice, on the other hand, that voice of the presence of God that is within you, has a calmer voice and a wider view of things. To become spiritually intelligent, to behave with wisdom and compassion, and to have inner and outer peace regardless of the condition, we have to train ourselves to listen more to our higher self and less to our ego. We often know that it's our ego talking when we're involved in drama. We have, as the great Lord Buddha says, some attachment to the way things must be. Now remember, attachment is different than intention. Intention is the voice of your higher power, your higher self. We want you to have strong intention about the way things should be. So let me just say that again. We want you to have strong intention about the way you want things to be. We teach that in the way that we pray here. Declare your desire as if it's so right now. Be firm. Be clear. Develop calm expectancy that your desire for a mate is right here, right now. Your desire for a car that is dependable and sexy is right here, right now. Your concern for homeless people is met with compassion and generosity right here, right now. That's your intention. We want you to have those intentions. The problem comes when our ego voice tells us that if we can't have what we want right now, we're not okay. When the voice of your ego starts shouting things like, this doesn't work, I'm not going back to that church, this doesn't work, or I can't, or there isn't enough, or I've tried this before, we get into fight or flight mode and become spiritually stupid. We need to have strong intention and low attachment. The truth is, we need a partnership between our ego and our higher self. We need the ego to not only keep us safe, but to interact with other embodied egos. Your ego can talk to their ego, but it should be the smallest part of your interactions, the smallest part of your conversations. The higher self, the self that says, I see the Christ in you, is where we're headed as we begin to develop skill 5. The section of skills is under the heading of, like I say, know thyself. Next week, I'm going to devote my comments to Mother's Day, and the week after that, I'm going to be looking at the next set of skills. Those skills are under the heading, know thy world. It'll be a great day to bring a friend. Know thy world with spiritual intelligence. How much of that can we use, for heaven's sakes? Speaking of Mother's Day, the practitioners are going to develop an altar out in the alley, out in the lobby for those of you who are going to be at church next week. Bring a picture of your mother if you like to go on the altar. Sally works very hard on these altars, and it'll be very nice to see your own mother there on one of her altars. So let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there is a power for good in this universe, and it's one we can use. And I give thanks for it. I give thanks for Great Spirit always saying yes. Yes, yes. I want more love in my life. Yes. I want more harmony in my life. Yes. I just have to know what it is I want and begin to put it out there. I give thanks for that. I release this word into law, and together we say, and so it is.